All right, it's Erik and Steve from Rains Feldman with another one of our cyber liability updates, and we're here in the first week of 2017. And on that note, I thought today, Steve, we would each talk about a trend or something to anticipate in the realm of internet law in this coming year. And so I thought I'd lead off with what I see as being perhaps the story in 2017 of increased hacking of law firms, and particularly with respect to folks who want to profit greatly from obtaining information about mergers and acquisitions. And that's generally the realm of, a few very large international law firms that do those types of billion-dollar deals. The Skadden Arps of the world, if you will, not to single them out, but that type of firm. They've got a tremendous amount of secret information with regard to who's buying who or what type of merger is taking place. So what you have had recently, you've had the uncovering of a ring of Chinese people who were hacking into law firms like that, getting that information, and then making trades in the stock market based upon that information. And obviously that is damaging in several ways. And so what I can see happening, because frankly law firms are ill prepared and are vulnerable targets probably to this with regard to their cybersecurity, even though they may advise clients on how to be secure. I think it's a fair critique of law firms that they're not on the cutting edge of cybersecurity. I can see these law firms being hit for malpractice claims, possibly. It'll be interesting to see how that happens. I could even foresee perhaps some sort of shareholder-based lawsuit against a law firm that you caused me to lose money because of your negligence in protecting the company's information. So I would keep an eye out on hacking of law firms. You could additionally see penalties brought by enforcement agencies. The Securities and Exchange Commission, I think, is really going to ramp up enforcement just because of the lucrative nature of trading on this information. So my trend to keep an eye out for is law firms holding sensitive deal information being hacked and perhaps subject to litigation themselves. What do you see coming down the pipe, or do you have a comment to add on that?
Yeah, a comment. I just wanted to say, similar to that, I think we'll probably continue to see medical hacking cases be prominent, and probably a few big ones show up in the news this year, just because although it's not quite as valuable as the information that you're talking about, patient records are much more valuable than the standard hackers hacking returns that they're getting. So the medical records and complete identity records that are associated with them can be much more valuable for identity theft. So I think those will continue to be a big news topic. They've been one in the past. So I think, that kind of hacking for high value targets is going to continue, and it's going to take a while for all of these institutions that might not be used to being hacking targets get their defenses up.
I think in the medical field, because I've recently been exposed to the detox industry, the drug rehab industry, and those rehab centers and detox businesses are, for lack of a better term, kind of mom and pop operations. They're not big. They're not Cedars-Sinai. They're not UCLA Health Center.
Right.
They're not, and those entities get hacked as well. But I would keep an eye on that detox rehab industry, especially because we all know that opioid addiction and so forth is really out of control. So you have a lot more people, I think, going into those type of facilities. So Steve, I know, give us a case maybe we should be keeping an eye out for this year.
Probably the biggest internet governance case that we know is going on and will be a big thing to watch this year is going to be the Hasselbeck appeal to the California Supreme Court that's gone up already. So it'll be up and probably decided this year by the California Supreme Court. If you remember, that was the case where Yelp had been ordered after a judgment against a poster on Yelp. Yelp had been ordered to take down the review. Yelp challenged that, lost the challenge at the Court of Appeals, the Court of Appeal in California, and now it's up to the California Supreme Court. A lot of the giant internet companies are weighing in, trying to support Yelp and saying, hey, you can't force us to take this off because of CDA 230 immunity. It'll be interesting to see how that shakes out, barring some statutory change to something like the DMCA or the CDA. That might be the biggest internet governance issue to be decided this year.
Yeah, and I'm not convinced that CDA 230 is really the best way for Yelp to go on it. I could be wrong, but I would, I have a hunch that maybe the due process issue might be the better argument, because what we're talking about, of course, is, in these internet defamation cases, the plaintiff gets a judgment against the poster.
Right.
The question is then, the content is still up on Yelp or Google or wherever, so does Yelp have to abide by a permanent injunction? Typically, a court would award a permanent injunction saying this content has to come off. But of course, Yelp wasn't at the party, so one view is that's a violation of their due process. I think the other view, and probably the correct view in my opinion, and the correct view with regard to the appellate court, was that Yelp is an instrumentality, is a tool being utilized by the poster, and in that case, it doesn't matter if they're a party to a litigation. They've got to obey that court order.
Right.
Yeah, that could really change the landscape, obviously, of internet governance with regard to content, because you'll have a lot of folks out there with permanent injunctions, and maybe rightly so. I'm not making a valid judgment on that, but if you're Google, you're going to have to employ a lot more in-house attorneys and paralegals to start cleaning that stuff up and removing it and paying a little more attention to the content that goes up.
Yeah, especially considering there's been sort of a trend more recently of Google not complying with those kinds of orders, where in the past they'd voluntarily done so. So that's a big governance issue that Google may have to lawyer up for, or they might get their win at the California Supreme Court.
So if you're someone defamed, if you're a business, if you're an executive defamed online, things might get really good for you this year if the California Supreme Court upholds what the appellate court did, because if you've been defamed, you can force Google to remove it if you get a judgment. If it goes the other way, then it's going to be tough sledding. So that's all for our initial cyber liability updated 2017. See you next week.